Hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to your daily sit rep for Monday, the 17th of November, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shelby. We have a lot to cover today. Robert, good morning. Let's go ahead and jump inside the Beltway here. So, last week we heard some weirdo broke into gained access rather to the office of U.S. Attorney there in New Jersey, and apparently he's been arrested now.
Yeah, good morning, Mike. And yes, the FBI has arrested that man. They said he was a 51-year-old man who did get access to U.S. Attorney Alina Habba's office and committed some property damage. He originally attempted to gain entry with a baseball bat and was turned away by security. And then they let him in when he came back without the baseball bat. Now they have said he has been arrested. I did not see yet if any indictment that has been released.
Mm-hmm. And any identity, was he deranged, a leftist? I repeat myself.
From the announcement from Attorney General Pam Bondi, I did not see any motive that they know of yet.
Okay. All right. And some good news for folks with Thanksgiving travel plans coming up. The FAA is winding down this national flight cut order.
So yesterday, the FAA did release a new order saying that it's ending those 10% nationwide flight cuts. They said this is because the air traffic controller staffing levels are improving, and there was only one staffing-related travel restriction released on Sunday. This is down from a peak of 81 staffing-related flight restrictions on the 8th of November. And since the beginning of the shutdown, I think the daily flight restrictions have hovered in the low double digits.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, this is kind of a blow to the Trump administration and their mid-decade redistricting plans. Indiana, last week or maybe over the weekend, officially announced they will not be passing any mid-decade redistricting plan for the state. Robert, they were looking at adding one Republican seat, maybe?
Correct. And this is an announcement from the state Senate President Roderick Bray, who has been resisting the Trump administration on this for the last few months. He said that they're not going to convene for a special session in December to vote on this new map. He said there's not enough votes in the Senate to move forward with a new map, but the White House did say they are inviting some Indiana Republicans who are resisting the mid-decade redistricting to the White House this week for one-on-one meetings. I think this is likely to attempt to put more pressure on them to get a map done, because the Indiana State House of Representatives says they have the votes to do it,
and the Senate does not. Okay. And then just when is the deadline, do you know, there in Indiana to potentially add a Republican seat before the midterms?
I don't know specifically in Indiana because it varies by state. For their primary elections for next year, I think they have to have the new map 30 to 60 days before the primary election starts. So for some of these states, the deadline is in January and February.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then finally, RevCom, which is the Revolutionary Communist Party, one of 3 or 4 communist parties here in the United States, quite small but boisterous. They run this group called Refuse Fascism, and someone sent me photographs back in October. On October the 18th, there was the No King's Day 2.0 rallies across the country, protests rather across the country. Someone sent me some pictures from their local protest. And there was a Refuse Fascism table out there. And he said, I don't know what this Refuse Fascism group is out there. So I gave him a very quick history lesson. Guys, this is one and it's RevCom, it's Revolutionary Communist Party. This is one very important example of why you want to go to these protests. See who is down there. At any rate, Robert, they had this Surround the White House protest 1.0. Now they're announcing 2.0.
Yeah, so the first event in this Surround the White House 1.0 protest was on Saturday. They are scheduled to hold a second protest event at the White House today at 3 p.m. Eastern. From what I can see from the information they put out, the idea is they want to create pressure on elected officials to impeach and remove President Trump. In their initial event that occurred 2 weeks ago, they claimed that they were going to have, I think, they wanted like 1 million people to show up, but from what I could see, maybe the low thousands actually turned out. And it was not all. There were other people that showed up to the event that were not from the Revolutionary Communist Party. Mm. So I expect turnout to be probably the same in the low thousands at the most.
Mm-hmm. Robert, let me just ask you this question. I have seen where right-wing organizers or say conservative organizers have tried to organize even just a simple rally, and you get a lot of conservatives out there, they're saying, no, that's a Fed operation. We're not going to go do this. It's filled with feds. I'm not going to be a part of that. And communists will go down without a second thought. Apparently no concern whatsoever that their movement is infiltrated. I find that kind of funny how, and I don't know if it's a psyop or I've talked about the differences, what I think the differences between folks on the left and folks on the right, why there is substantial turnout on the left and there's not often substantial turnout on the right. I think that has to do with submission to a particular cause at any rate. And I've explained that on the Out Front with Mike Shelby show a couple times. Why do you think this is that you can have a revolutionary party turn out into the thousands outside the White House with apparently no fear whatsoever of reprisal or retaliation or lawfare or anything like that?
Well, I think the difference between conservatives turning out for these protests and progressive democratic socialists and leftists turning out is that there is what I would call something like the politics of anxiety. Basically, the idea is that on the left side of the spectrum, you can get people to turn out because everyone or most people on the left side of the spectrum, including more centrist liberals, are concerned about the smallest things happening everywhere. They treat, political developments in small towns in Arkansas as if they're personally affecting them. And that gets them to actually go out to these events. And on the right side of the spectrum, I think there's an absence of that. So people will be much more dismissive of collective action. I think the idea that every right-wing group is infiltrated by federal agents is just basically a coping mechanism for that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, it goes back to that meme. It's actually not a meme. I guess it's a scientific study. What is it showing? Showing that conservatives are more concerned with their families and liberals or progressives typically more concerned with the welfare of others at the cost of their own families or something like that.
Yeah, the famous heat map study, which I think points towards that there is a performative aspect to people on the left and liberal, parts of the political spectrum turning out, because it is a political signal that just doesn't exist on the right side of the political spectrum.
All right. Thanks for that, Robert. Let's go ahead and move on to our global sitrep. Jared, good morning. I'm sure many of you have seen the videos now from over the weekend of protests against Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. They're in Mexico City. What's the latest, Jared?
Yes. So I haven't seen hard numbers, but plenty have said thousands have shown up here. This was in Mexico City against Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, and also in response to several high-profile cartel crimes, including the November 1st murder of the Uruapan mayor Carlos Manzo, and that one previously had protests local to his city, and even at his funeral, there was a protest where they accused the state governor of aiding the murder of Carlos Manzo. So this does appear to actually be escalating in nature from that. Now, moving over much closer to home, the State Department announced that it's going to designate the Cartel de los Soles, which is allegedly headed by the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, as a foreign terrorist organization, and this will begin on the 24th of November, 2025. Down in Panama, several members of Panama's legislature are reportedly preparing a delegation for a visit to Taiwan. Now, this is important because they don't have diplomatic relations with Taiwan. The president and foreign ministry said they cannot stop the visit, but they will not give it a government endorsement. And Panama actually only even switched to recognizing China as the one China in 2017. So some of these, there's a very good chance most of these legislators were recognizing Taiwan to begin with back then. It was not that long ago. Then over in the Pacific, the war of words between China and Japan is escalating quite a bit into some actions, actually. China's curtailing tourism and student exchanges over to Japan, and China's actually Japan's number one source of tourism. They make up about 25%, so that's an economic hit against Japan. They're sending several more Coast Guard ships down to the Senkakus, and they're even canceling a sideline G20 meeting that was planned out, and that's over a week from now. So they're not planning on de-escalating this anytime soon. This is all in response to the Japanese prime minister saying that she would be involved in any kind of Taiwan conflict. And Japan is sending a diplomat to try to de-escalate, but it's also saying that nothing has changed in their security policies.
Jared, do you remember when the United States deployed that X-band radar system to South Korea and the Chinese flipped out? Because, I mean, legitimately, it would have allowed the United States to have vision, 300, 400 miles or something into mainland China with this radar. And one of the things China did in response is they stopped all tourism. They banned tourism to South Korea, which had a huge effect on the tourism economy. I think South Korea is probably in the same boat. Their number one tourist origin country is probably China, I think. And it did not, it was a couple of weeks maybe or something like that. And South Korea and the United States ended up moving that X-band radar system back out of South Korea. This is a form of economic warfare. It's economic reprisal. And so I say that to say China has a history of doing this. So I guess China wants Japan to back down and to say that Japan will not get involved. Japan clearly thinks that's an existential issue. China conducting any kind of military action and repatriating Taiwan. So anything else to add there, Jared?
There was one other thing from the PLA Daily, the People's Liberation Army Daily, kind of like the Chinese Stars and Stripes. They promised to turn the entirety of Japan from Hokkaido down to Okinawa into a lake of fire, which I thought was important because China has previously courted Okinawa as potentially being a separate state, and basically trying to break them off. And that threat obviously kind of shows their cards saying, hey, yeah, we still want you. You're still an enemy, even though we might want to break you off from Japan. This seems to have really upset them where they're not even worried about how it looks in their neighborhood diplomacy there. Mm-hmm. And then kind of staying in that region, the U.S., Japan, and Philippines carried out their latest multilateral maritime cooperative activity down in the South China Sea. This particular one was focused on logistics interoperability and replenishment at sea, which is how you keep ships out for more than about 2 weeks at a time. This is the latest step in developing the U.S., Japan, Australia joint logistics network to overcome the tyranny of distance, which we've talked about ad nauseum for the past few years in the event of a Pacific War. And that trilateral agreement was announced over the summer. But it is interesting to note that the Philippines is being wrapped up into this, being taught how to actually conduct these maneuvers, which is, for those who don't know, replenishment at sea requires you to get to about 150 yards between ships. It's close enough that the water actually pulls the ships into each other. So it's a highly dangerous maneuver. But if done right, you get extreme longevity out of your ships.
Mm-hmm. All right. Interesting. Thanks for that, Jared. And with that, we do have 54 protests coming up today. I just want to address this one comment right here. This is about why conservatives don't show up. Custos says, sorry, but you are wrong. The reason why there's more show up on the left versus the right is the people on the right have what I call a job. Listen, a protest on a Monday or Tuesday, yeah, sure, I buy that, obviously. But in many cases, we're talking about Saturday protests. Conservatives don't show up unless there's a high sense of urgency. I think for a couple of reasons. We're talking about on Saturdays here. And just briefly, my theory on why this is protest is just not a common tactic on the right. Sure, they've happened before, but if anything happens, you have these left-wing activists say, let's go have a protest. And that's just not the typical course of action or typical response you see among conservatives. My theory comes down to submission. And what I see most often is that conservative men will submit themselves to only a very limited number of things, to God or to religion, to their family. Not many things will they submit to, maybe a handful of other things. But I think on the left, they're far more willing to submit themselves to a cause. And when I say submit, they're talking about giving over part of their power or authority to a cause or to a group that's trying to advance a specific cause. And I've explained that in more rigorous detail and analysis on the Out Front show. but I think that's probably why. All right, with that, everyone, thanks so much for your support. That's going to do it for our daily sit rep. Next slide, please, Jared. Over on the early warning portion of the brief, this is our members only portion. We're going to jump into the Homeland Operations sit rep. Talk about what's going to happen in Charlotte. This federal surge operation just kicked off in Charlotte over the past few days. It is new. We're seeing a lot of indications that the things that were happening in Chicago are about to begin happening in Charlotte. And we'll break that down for you over for members only. Head over to forwardobserver.com/trial. If you sign up now, there's still time to join us. And everyone, thanks again for watching. And early warning, folks, please stand by. Jared, please take us out.